Shabbat Shalom. Today would have been Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's 92nd birthday. I've been reflecting this week on his legacy and why I personally chose to become a rabbi. Usually when people ask me, Rabbi Alex, why did you become a rabbi? I usually give some version of the story that I grew up very Jewishly involved, drifted away around college, and reconnected in my mid-20s. This is true, and with the unfolding events in Washington this past week or so, and the pandemic at an all-time high, I realized there is a deeper truth that I haven't been sharing as much. I became a rabbi because I believe that Judaism can change the world. I don't mean this lightly or metaphorically. I mean this quite literally. And I mean it in a moment when our world needs a lot of change. When our nation needs a lot of change. A lot of change. There are three areas of Jewish theology, each present in this week's Parsha, that have the potential to change the world. First, there's the theology of personal transformation. As we ended last week's Parsha, the first Parsha in the book of Exodus, we zoomed in on Moses, who had his first failed attempt of saying, "Let my people go," to Pharaoh. Not only did Pharaoh say no, but he made the Israelites do even more work with fewer resources. Feeling the weight of this initial failure, Moses is disheartened, despondent. He begins to doubt himself and God. He says, "Eternal One, why did you bring harm upon this people? Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has dealt worse with this people, and you still have not delivered your people." The initial steps of resistance lead not to immediate freedom, but to more oppression, more suffering, more pain, more cruelty. Moses, as an individual, quickly loses faith. He loses hope, and he loses patience. That's how last week ended. This week, we begin with words of encouragement from God to Moses. God reminds Moses that God established a covenant with Moses' ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that God hears the suffering of the Israelite people. God reminds Moses that they are in relationship. God reminds Moses that they have ancestral history. God reminds Moses that God sees the problems of the present, and God reminds Moses that they will partner for a better future. Grounded in these truths, grounded in this relationship with the divine, Moses is able to reignite his courage, his hope, and his patience. We learn from this interaction that a deep and intimate connection with the divine, actively cultivated through spiritual practice, has the potential to change us as individuals. Even Moses, our most holy teacher and leader in our tradition, had moments of doubt, fear, and impatience. Like Moses, it takes turning to God, turning to the divine, turning to sacred practice that allows us to become the people we want to be, the people we are meant to be. This is our model of Jewish theology of individual transformation. The divine wants us and invites us to grow. In a moment when nearly everyone is struggling as individuals to find joy, meaning, connection, hope, we know we need a theology of personal transformation that will enable our own growth. While this reconnection to God is enough to reinvigorate Moses and send him on his way, it is not enough to convince the Israelites. The Torah tells us, "Lo shamu el Moshe." They did not listen to Moses. This brings us to our second area of theology that has the potential to transform our world, which is public theology. Public theology essentially asks the question, what does the divine have to do with us being a public, a group of people, a community, a nation? How do we relate to each other? How do we see one another? How do we learn from each other, disagree with each other, engage with each other? The Israelites living in fear and suffering cannot hear the truth that Moses is telling them. They don't listen. And on Moses' part, he is unable to communicate in a way that can reach them. Like so many times in our own nation, truth gets obfuscated. hidden away through fear and poor communication. Elsewhere in Torah, we read of an agreement between Lavan, the father of Rachel and Leah, who deceived Jacob. Their relationship was complicated, conflictual. But when they say goodbye, Lavan declares, "May the Holy One watch between you and me when we are out of sight of each other." These near enemies declare that God will watch their relationship, how they hold up their end of their agreement when they are no longer living in close proximity. Their relationship will still hold God between them, which demands honesty, accountability, and respect, even if they don't like each other. This is the work of public theology, changing how we relate to each other across difference, seeing that each of us is made in the divine image and that God dwells between us, even when we are out of sight from each other. Jewish public theology can change the way we relate to each other. And this brings us to the final area of theology, liberation theology. Initially developed by Catholic priests in Latin America, liberation theology teaches that God wants freedom for the oppressed. God acts to support liberation and justice. In this week's Parsha, we get through some of the plagues. We don't yet reach freedom for the Israelite people, but we know it is coming. We know that God is part of the process that alters the relations of power. Who has say over people's bodies, over people's lives, over people's labor? God demands freedom and justice. When we retell this story at the Passover Seder, we drink 4 cups of wine, each to remind us of a different stage in the process of redemption, of God bringing us to freedom. Freedom is sacred. Liberation is sacred. Justice is sacred. Doing this work is sacred. It is holy. It is part of the work of Jewish theology. This is what I mean when I say I believe Judaism can change the world. A theology of individual transformation that will help us grow as people. A public theology that enables us to relate to each other as human beings created in the divine image. A liberation theology that helps us imagine and enact the truth that another world is possible. This Shabbat is the last Shabbat of the current presidential administration. Following a violent insurrection, and for the first time in our nation's history, a president has been impeached twice. Next Shabbat, we will have a new president and administration. Wherever we stand politically, this is a hard moment for personal transformation. It is a hard moment for civil engagement, and it is a hard time for justice. Inauguration is not liberation. And I prayed that it brings us one step closer. I want to close tonight with the words of Jewish theologian Michael Walzer from his book Exodus and Revolution. Walzer teaches, "We still believe, or many of us do, what the Exodus first taught about the meaning and possibility of politics. First, that wherever you live, it is probably Egypt. Second, that there is a better place, a world more attractive, a promised land. And third, that the way to the land is through the wilderness. There is no way to get from here to there except by joining together and marching. May our journey be safe, may it be courageous, and may we all find the strength to let Judaism change us and change the world. Shabbat Shalom.